It's one of the most chilling and important stories from modern history. How does a modern, cultured nation, a democracy no less, end up willingly voting itself into a brutal dictatorship? To even begin to understand how that can happen, we have to look at the story of Germany's Weimar Republic and how it collapsed into the Nazi regime. So, how does it actually happen? How does a democracy die? It's almost never a single sudden event. It's usually more like a slow sickness, a series of crises, a bunch of seductive promises, and ultimately a string of terrible choices that lead a country down a really, really dark path. To find the real answers, we need to rewind the clock back to 1918. Germany has just lost the First World War. The emperor, the Kaiser, has fled. Soldiers are coming home to a nation that's literally starving, and the whole country is just simmering with this potent mix of anger and confusion. But right in the middle of all this chaos, something new is about to be born. And that something new was the Weimar Republic, Germany's very first real shot at a full democracy. The problem was it was a government that was born with the deck completely stacked against it from day one. Its very first major act was to sign the Treaty of Versailles, and the terms were, well, they were just devastating. Germany lost huge chunks of its land, all of its overseas colonies. Its proud army was basically dismantled, shrunk down to almost nothing. On top of that, it was saddled with a debt so massive it was hard to comprehend. But maybe the worst part of all, psychologically, was that Germany was forced to accept 100% of the blame for starting the war. For millions of Germans, this wasn't peace. It was a national humiliation. And this humiliation gave birth to a really toxic and dangerous story. The politicians who signed the treaty were immediately branded the November criminals. And this powerful myth started to spread like wildfire. The idea that Germany wasn't actually defeated on the battlefield, but was betrayed from within, that it had been stabbed in the back. This one idea poisoned the well of democracy before it ever really had a chance to get started. So, with a foundation built on resentment and shame, the first few years of this new republic were anything but stable. In fact, they were a constant, desperate battle for survival against forces from all sides that wanted to tear it down. And the threats came from everywhere. On the far left, you had communists trying to start a revolution. On the far right, you had these resentful ex-soldiers who formed their own private armies. First, they were used by the government to crush the communists, and then they turned around and tried to overthrow the government themselves. The new democracy was caught right in the middle of a violent, chaotic crossfire. And as if all the political violence wasn't enough, the economy completely imploded. When Germany couldn't make its reparation payments, the government made a truly fatal mistake. It just started printing more and more money. And this triggered one of the most catastrophic economic events you can imagine, something called hyperinflation. To give you an idea of just how insane things got, think about this. A simple loaf of bread that cost 1 German mark in 1919, just 4 years later, cost 200 billion marks. People's life savings, their pensions, everything they had ever worked for, it all became completely worthless, practically overnight. Just try to wrap your head around that. The money in your pocket is literally more useful as fuel to keep you warm than it is as currency to buy things. That kind of trauma, it doesn't just destroy an economy. It shatters people's faith in the entire system. It completely erodes their trust in democratic government, in the very idea of stability. It's the kind of deep, profound chaos that makes people desperate for any alternative, no matter how extreme it sounds. But then, just as things looked their absolute darkest, the chaos started to subside. For a brief, shining moment in the mid-1920s, it actually seemed like the Weimar Republic might just make it after all. Thanks to a really capable leader named Gustav Stresemann, Germany started to stabilize. He introduced a new currency that finally stopped the hyperinflation. Crucially, American loans started flowing in, which helped rebuild German industry. The country even began to repair its relationships with its neighbors and was welcomed back onto the world stage, joining the League of Nations. It really felt like a new dawn. This newfound stability unleashed an incredible cultural explosion. These were the golden years. Berlin became the world capital of exciting new art, music, and social experimentation. But, and this is a really big but, this new freedom wasn't celebrated by everyone. For many in the more traditional, rural parts of the country, all this looked like moral decay. It was proof to them that the republic was corrupt and decadent. The social fabric of the country was still deeply, deeply divided. And that fragile stability, built on a foundation of American loans and a delicate political balance, was about to be absolutely shattered. In 1929, the Wall Street crash in New York sent a tidal wave of economic destruction across the entire globe, and it hit Germany harder than almost anywhere else. The American loans just dried up overnight. Factories shut their doors. And by 1932, a staggering 6 million Germans were out of work. People were hungry again, they were desperate again, and they were losing all hope in their democratic government, which seemed totally paralyzed, completely unable to do anything to help. And you can see the direct result right here. It's crystal clear. In 1928, during the good times, the Nazi Party was just this tiny, insignificant fringe group. They got less than 3% of the vote. Just 4 years later, in the depths of the Great Depression, they were the single largest political party in Germany. Desperation was pushing people to the extremes. Now, the Nazi Party didn't win an outright majority, but that massive surge in support gave them the power they needed. And what happened next wasn't a violent revolution in the streets. It was something much quieter and much more terrifying, a shockingly fast and methodical demolition of democracy from the inside. The most crucial point here is just how quickly this all went down. In January of '33, Hitler is made chancellor. The old-school politicians made a huge mistake thinking they could control him. Just 1 month later, the German parliament building mysteriously burns down. Hitler uses it as the perfect excuse to immediately suspend basic rights and arrest his opponents. A month after that, the Enabling Act is passed, which basically gives him the power of a dictator. And by the summer of the next year, less than 18 months later, all other parties are banned and Hitler has absolute total power. Democracy was officially dead. And with democracy completely dismantled, the true nature of the Nazi regime was finally unleashed, first upon Germany, and then, eventually, upon the rest of the world. The promises that had brought them to power quickly revealed a terrifying reality. The Nazi promises were really just a dark twisting of the truth. They promised jobs, right? Well, they delivered those jobs by firing Jewish people, women, and anyone who opposed them. They promised national pride, but they enforced it with the terror of the secret police and concentration camps. They promised a return to traditional values, but that just meant forcing women out of public life and confining them to the home. And their promise of a pure society, well, that led directly to the systematic persecution and eventual murder of millions of people. Having secured total control at home, Hitler turned his attention outward. The steps that led to war were rapid and deliberate. The persecution of Jewish people was made official law. Then came aggression against his neighbors, which all culminated in the invasion of Poland in 1939. And that was the final straw that triggered the Second World War. So we come back to that first question, how does a democracy die? The story of Weimar Germany seems to suggest that it dies when crisis and humiliation make people truly desperate. It dies when they lose all faith in their institutions, and it dies when a leader comes along who offers them simple answers, a scapegoat for all their problems, and a promise, no matter how dark, to restore their pride. And the warning from that history is all wrapped up in this final question for all of us to think about.